On June 8, 793, the monks at Lindisfarne Priory on England's northeast coast were going about their morning routines when longships appeared offshore. By the time the brothers realized what was happening, Viking raiders were already storming the beach. Some monks were slain immediately. Others were stripped naked and driven into the sea to drown. The rest were chained together and hauled aboard ships as slaves, destined for markets in Scandinavia and beyond. The scholar Alcuin of York, writing from the court of Charlemagne, captured the horror. Never before has such terror appeared in Britain as we have now suffered from a pagan race. The rage shocked Christian Europe precisely because the monks had no defense strategy. They'd assumed their sacred status would protect them. It didn't. But here's what medieval sources don't emphasize enough. Plenty of communities did survive Viking raids. Some even fought the raiders off entirely. Between 793 and the early 900s, as Viking attacks intensified across Britain, Ireland, and continental Europe, certain places developed strategies that dramatically improved their odds. If you lived in the 9th century coastal England and saw those distinctive square sails on the horizon, your survival depended on doing very specific things and doing them fast. First, Vikings weren't mindless berserkers killing everyone for sport. They were businessmen with weapons. When a raiding party of 30 to 100 warriors beached their shallow draft longships and rushed inland, they had clear objectives: portable wealth, captives for the slave trade, and food. That order mattered. At Lindisfarne, the Vikings specifically targeted the monastery because it was wealthy, poorly defended, and stuffed with gold and silver altar vessels, illuminated manuscripts with jeweled covers, and other ecclesiastical treasures. Monasteries were essentially unguarded banks sitting on isolated coastlines. The monks at Iona in Scotland learned this the hard way. Viking raids in 795, 802, and 806 killed 68 monks in that last attack alone. But Vikings avoided heavily defended targets. When Count Odo of Paris successfully fortified the city with strong towers and a determined garrison in 885 to 886, a massive Viking force of reportedly 700 ships and almost 40,000 men besieged Paris for over a year, but they could never capture it entirely. Eventually, the Frankish emperor, Charles the Fat, paid them 700 pounds of silver to leave. The Vikings accepted because the siege was costing them more than the payoff. That's lesson one. Vikings preferred soft targets. If you made resistance too expensive, they'd go elsewhere. By the 880s, King Alfred the Great of Wessex had figured out the Viking playbook. The raiders relied on surprise dawn attacks, navigating rivers in their shallow draft longships to strike inland targets before defenders could mobilize. Alfred's solution was revolutionary. He created a network of fortified towns called burhs, positioned so that no settlement in Wessex was more than 20 miles from one. This wasn't just about fortifications, it was an early warning system. Watchtowers along the coast spotted Viking sails and lit signal fires. Mounted messengers carried warnings inland. By the time raiders landed, nearby communities had already driven livestock into the burhs, hidden valuables, and assembled militia forces. The Burgle Heidage, a document from Alfred's reign, shows this network in detail. 33 fortified towns, each garrisoned by local men who'd exchanged military service for land. When Vikings hit Wessex after 880, they kept running into prepared defenses instead of surprise farmers. It worked. Viking raids in Wessex declined dramatically. The key was time. Vikings operated on speed, beached the ships at dawn, hit the target by mid-morning, load plunder, and sail away before any organized resistance arrived. Alfred's system compressed that window to nothing. If you're a 9th century villager and someone shouts a warning, you've got maybe 30 minutes before armed Vikings reach your settlement. Here's your survival playbook. First, don't fight unless you're part of an organized militia. Individual farmers with hand tools don't beat trained warriors with swords, axes, and shields. At the 865 raid on Winchester, citizens who resisted were cut down. Those who fled to the burh at Winchester survived. Second, hide what Vikings want most. Portable wealth goes underground: coins, jewelry, silver, anything valuable. Dozens of Viking-age hoards found across Britain and Ireland represent exactly this. Families bearing valuables before raids, sometimes never returning to retrieve them. The Coordale hoard in Lancashire, over 8,600 items, including 7,000 coins, was likely buried during Viking conflicts around 905 to 910. Third, if you can't reach a fortified burh, flee to forests or marshlands. Vikings didn't waste time combing through woods for individual farmers. They wanted quick strikes on concentrated wealth. Communities near York established pre-arranged meeting points in nearby forests where families could regroup after raiders left. Fourth, if captured, cooperative prisoners were more likely to be ransomed than killed. Vikings made more money selling captives as thralls, slaves, than executing them. The slave markets at Dublin, Hedeby, and beyond created financial incentives to keep prisoners alive. Resist during capture, and you'd likely be killed as too much trouble. Cooperate, and you might be ransomed within months if your community or family could raise the funds. In 866, the Great Heathen Army, one of the largest Viking forces ever to reach England, said in later sagas to include the sons of Ragnar Lothbrok, began its invasion of the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms. Most settlements fell quickly, but a few exceptions existed. The town of Nottingham had fortified itself on a naturally defensible sandstone outcrop with steep cliffs on three sides. When the Viking army arrived, they found walls, organized defenders, and no easy approach. The Vikings besieged Nottingham for months, waiting for starvation or surrender. Neither came. King Burhrs of Mercia eventually arrived with a relief force, and the Vikings, realizing they'd invested too much time for too little return, negotiated a settlement and moved on to softer targets in East Anglia. That's the pattern. Organized defense, fortifications, and willingness to endure a siege usually convince Vikings that easier plunder existed elsewhere. Sometimes communities just paid Vikings to go away. The Danegeld system, formalized in 991 after the Battle of Maldon, saw English kingdoms paying enormous silver tributes to avoid raids. Between 991 and 1012, England paid over 160,000 pounds of silver to various Viking forces. Did it work? Short term, yes. Specific raiding parties would leave. Long term, it was disastrous. It advertised that England was wealthy, poorly defended, and willing to pay. For this reason, more Vikings came and the payments escalated. By 1012, England was paying 48,000 pounds of silver in a single payment to the army of Thorkel the Tall. Sometimes local communities paying off small raiding parties worked. A village that collected silver and negotiated with a single ship's crew of 30 men could buy them off cheaper than losing everything to the raid. The problem was when kings paid massive tributes to massive armies that just funded the next invasion. By the early 900s, Alfred's son Edward the Elder and grandson Athelstan had extended the burh system across England. They added mobile field armies, the Fyrd, reorganized to serve in rotating shifts so farmers could both defend the realm and work their land. They built bridges that could be fortified and controlled, limiting Viking river access. Most importantly, they created a culture of organized resistance. Instead of isolated villages panicking at the sight of longships, communities had practiced emergency procedures. They knew where to go, what to bring, and who commanded the local defense. When Vikings raided, they encountered coordinated responses. This system wasn't perfect. Raids still happened, people still died, wealth was still stolen. But survival rates improved dramatically. The random catastrophic raids like Lindisfarne became rarer. Communities that adopted Alfred's methods endured. Medieval chroniclers loved dramatic stories of Viking brutality, and plenty of genuine brutality happened. But they undersold the unglamorous reality that most people who survived Viking raids did so through preparation, not heroism. You survived by living within 20 miles of a burh, by watching the coast for sails, by burying your silver and driving your livestock to safety at the first alarm, by having a pre-arranged escape route to forests or marshland, by knowing when to flee, when to hide, and when organized militia defense had a chance. You survived by making yourself an expensive target. The monks at Lindisfarne died because they were rich, isolated, and defenseless. The citizens of Paris survived in 885 because they'd built fortifications, stored food, and prepared to endure a siege. Vikings weren't supernatural demons. They were raiders operating on profit margins. Make the raid too difficult, too time-consuming, or too dangerous, and they'd beach their longships somewhere else. Communities that understood this lived. Those that didn't became horror stories told by scholars like Alcuin of York. On June 8, 793 at Lindisfarne, those monks had no warning system, no fortifications, no weapons, and no escape plan. They assumed sanctity would protect them. A century later, thanks to Alfred's reforms, English communities knew better. When longships appeared, they weren't praying for miracles. They were grabbing their valuables, heading for the nearest burh, and preparing to wait out raiders who'd find richer, easier targets elsewhere. Survival wasn't about defeating Vikings in glorious combat. It was about making sure the Vikings defeated someone else instead. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe to our channel. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.